Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you did not notice the knife until it pressed against your future? Have you ever watched a warm smile hide a cold plan and wondered when the switch flipped from partnership to plotting? If the person beside you started counting your kindness as weakness, would you fight for the name you built or for the values that gave it meaning? Tell me in the comments what you would do, because today I am opening the door to the day I learned the difference between loyalty and leverage. Now I tell my story. Please take the time to listen to my confidences. Breathe with me through the sweet and the angry, and decide for yourself where dignity belongs. My name is Clara Jennings. I am 38 years old, and I was born and raised in Asheville, North Carolina, though I now live just outside of Raleigh where I run my business. For the past 8 years, I have dedicated my life to a company I built from the ground up, a relocation service designed specifically for seniors, one that focused not only on moving belongings, but on preserving dignity and honoring memories during life's most difficult transitions. It was more than a job. It was a calling, something I poured my heart into after watching my own grandmother suffer through a traumatic move to assisted living with no guidance or compassion. That pain became my mission. And over time, I grew from a one-woman operation to a respected regional service with employees, referrals, and a reputation for care that no one else could match. I thought I had built a family, both with the clients who trusted me and the partner who stood by my side. But that illusion shattered on one quiet morning in April of 2021. The day began simply enough. The sun was barely up when I pulled into the driveway of one of our clients, an 87-year-old widow named Mrs. Caldwell, who was moving from the home she had shared with her late husband for over 60 years. I like to arrive early on moving days because seniors appreciate a calm and steady presence before the chaos begins, and I always bring a fresh notebook and a warm cup of coffee to help me focus. My travel mug was still warm when I reached for my clipboard on the passenger seat, but before I could step out, a voice carried through the morning air, sharp and unmistakable. It was Vanessa Cruz, my business partner, parked 2 houses down, speaking into her phone without realizing I was there. Her laughter rang out, bright but cutting, and her words froze me in place. Clara has no idea. By summer, she'll be retired, and the investors will be running everything. My hand stopped midair, my clipboard suspended like a weapon I no longer knew how to wield. In that instant, everything I thought I knew about her collapsed. I had trusted Vanessa with my company, with my dream, with the lives of the people we served, and now I realized she was planning to erase me as if I were nothing more than an obstacle in her path. 8 years of sweat, sacrifice, and stubborn hope. All of it was suddenly in jeopardy, not from a stranger or a competitor, but from the very person I had welcomed into my life as an ally. I sat perfectly still, every muscle tense, as her voice carried across the silence of the street. She spoke with casual cruelty, describing me as though I were already gone, a relic to be swept aside so she could impress her so-called investors with efficiency and profit. My chest tightened with equal parts rage and heartbreak, because in those words, I heard not only betrayal, but also disdain for the people we served, for widows like Mrs. Caldwell who needed patience, understanding, and compassion above all else. To Vanessa, our clients were numbers on a chart, obstacles to speed, and I realized with horror that she had never truly believed in our mission. I wanted to throw the door open, to confront her right there on the street, but something in me held back. I slid lower in my seat, barely breathing, and let her words burn themselves into my memory like a scar I would never forget. She ended her call and stepped out of her car with a smile so polished it was almost a mask, walking past me without even noticing, as if I were invisible. In that moment, I truly felt like a ghost in my own company, already written out of the story I had created. But what Vanessa did not know was that the ghost she was trying to bury was about to become the shadow that haunted her every step. I stayed in my car that morning, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, listening to words that cut through me more sharply than any blade could. Vanessa's voice carried clear and strong, every sentence a blow to the chest. "These seniors do not need hand-holding," she said with a mocking laugh. "Once Clara is out, we can triple our client load. We will present her inefficiencies to the board, the missed appointments, the stubborn refusal to standardize. Trust me, they will have no choice but to side with us." I could barely breathe. Missed appointments? In 8 years, I had rescheduled only 2. One when I was in the hospital with pneumonia, and one when a grieving client had begged me not to leave her alone. That was what Vanessa called inefficiency. As her words sank deeper, the truth became clearer. She had been preparing this attack for months, maybe years, slowly gathering her ammunition in secret. Every time I had chosen compassion over speed, every time I had extended extra hours to a frightened widow, she had been keeping score. Not to honor the clients we served, but to build a case against me. And what stung most was not even the betrayal of me. It was the way she dismissed the people we cared for. She laughed about Mrs. Caldwell's antique dining set, saying her children would just throw it away anyway. She spoke about widows' memories like they were nothing more than obstacles to profits. Hearing that cruelty made my stomach twist with resentment I had never felt before. I thought back to when I first met Vanessa, how she had seemed so enthusiastic, so genuine, telling me she believed in the mission of treating seniors with dignity. I had seen her as a partner, someone who could help me grow our service without sacrificing compassion. I had even given her part ownership, believing she deserved to share in what we were building. But now I realized that she had studied me carefully, learned my methods, and patiently waited for the chance to turn them against me. I felt foolish, like I had handed her the keys to my own destruction. 8 years of sacrifice, and she was going to sell it to strangers who did not know or care what those years had cost me. When she hung up and walked toward Mrs. C. Caldwell's front door, she plastered on her warmest smile as if nothing were wrong, greeting the very woman she had mocked only seconds earlier. I forced myself to breathe, forced myself to step out of my car, straighten my blouse, and pretend that the ground beneath me had not just crumbled. "Good morning, Mrs. Caldwell," I called, steady though I was shaking inside. Her face lit up with relief, her arms opening for a gentle hug that smelled of lavender and powder, the kind of hug that reminded me why I started this work in the first place. She trusted me. They all trusted me. And I could not let Vanessa destroy that trust. Inside the house, I watched as Vanessa rushed through the kitchen, her hands careless as she wrapped fragile glasses, acting as though this family's memories were just inventory. Mrs. Caldwell turned to me and whispered that she had changed her mind about giving away her dining set, that her granddaughter wanted to keep it. I smiled and said, "That is wonderful news." Vanessa did not even pause. She was already calculating time, money, efficiency. I looked at her and felt something shift inside me. That was the moment I decided I would not confront her yet. I would wait. I would let her believe she was winning, because the longer she underestimated me, the more powerful my eventual response would be. What she thought was my silence was really the beginning of my plan. I stood there in Mrs. Caldwell's living room that morning, trying to keep my face calm as I watched Vanessa move like a machine. Her hands were fast, her movements sharp, and her eyes flicked from item to item as if they were numbers on a checklist rather than memories of a lifetime. She looked professional to anyone who did not know better, but I could see the truth hiding behind her polished smile. Every nod, every gesture, every sweet word to Mrs. Caldwell was calculated, like a knife disguised in silk. I realized then that Vanessa was not just plotting against me behind closed doors. She was already erasing the values that made our company different. Mrs. E. Caldwell asked timidly if her grandmother's piano could be moved to her new apartment, her voice trembling with both hope and fear. Before I could answer, Vanessa cut in with a dismissive tone. "That piano is worthless," she whispered sharply to me, low enough that Mrs. Caldwell could not hear. "It will not fit, and no one wants it." I felt heat rise in my chest. That piano was not just wooden strings. It was the last echo of a family's joy, a piece of history that still carried meaning. To Vanessa, it was just another inconvenience. To me, it was sacred. And in that instant, I saw how deeply our values had diverged. We were no longer partners working toward the same mission. We were enemies, standing in the same room, pretending to be allies. I remembered the nights I had stayed awake planning better ways to comfort our clients, designing the memory chests that gave them something familiar on the very first day in their new homes. I remembered the tears of gratitude from daughters and sons who told me I had given their parents peace. Those moments had built my identity as much as they had built our business. And now I was staring at a woman who was willing to throw all of it away for speed, efficiency, and money. I wanted to confront her right there in front of everyone, to call out her coldness, but I held back. Because I realized if she wanted to play a long game of betrayal, then I could play a longer one. Vanessa's smile never faltered as she continued packing, and to the outside eye, she looked like the picture of professionalism. But I saw the cracks beneath her performance. I saw the impatience in the way she rolled her eyes when Mrs. Caldwell paused to reminisce over a fragile dish. I saw the way she dismissed the granddaughter's questions with a quick nod, as though she were swatting at flies. And I felt something new rising inside me. Not just pain, not just betrayal, but a sharp edge of resolve. If she thought I was weak because I cared too much, then she had no idea what strength really looked like. That day, I made a silent vow to myself. I would not just survive this betrayal. I would make sure Vanessa understood what it felt like to underestimate me. She thought she was clever, that she could build a case against me with half-truths and cold statistics. But what she did not realize was that compassion itself was my weapon, and the loyalty it inspired could never be bought. She walked through that house with her mask of warmth, hiding the knife she carried in her words, but I had already seen through it. And while she thought I was paralyzed, I was already sharpening my own blade. Not one of cruelty, but of strategy, patience, and quiet revenge. In the weeks that followed, I said nothing about what I had overheard. Silence became my shield, and observation became my weapon. I began to notice things I had once brushed aside, small changes that now looked like pieces of a larger plan. Vanessa scheduled consultations faster than I ever would, rushing families through decisions that should have been handled with tenderness. She spoke in team meetings about efficiency models and standardized packages, as if the people we served were identical units on a conveyor belt. Every word she said planted seeds of suspicion in my mind, and every action confirmed the betrayal I had uncovered. I watched how she charmed the newer employees, the ones who had not yet seen how deeply our work depended on empathy. She took them aside for quiet conversations, painting herself as the visionary leader who would take the company to the next level. To them, she looked ambitious, confident, inspiring. To me, she looked like a spider weaving her web, each thread carefully spun to capture the loyalty of people too new to know the truth. I did not warn them. Not yet. If I exposed her too early, she would deny everything, and I would look paranoid. Instead, I let her think she was winning, while I studied her every move. Then came her announcement of a company retreat. She stood in our weekly meeting, her smile glowing with false sincerity, and said she wanted to align the team and explore growth opportunities. I nodded as though impressed, though inside I knew exactly what she was doing. A retreat was the perfect stage for her to unveil her so-called transformation, to show the team her new model and paint me as the outdated founder standing in the way. Instead of fighting her idea, I surprised her. I said, "This is your chance, Vanessa. You organize it. Shape the future direction." For a moment her eyes widened, unprepared for my agreement. Then she recovered and smiled. She thought I had surrendered, but what I had really done was hand her the rope she would use to hang herself. Because while she was planning her retreat, I was planning something very different. I knew the true value of our business was not in contracts, or trucks, or office furniture. It was in the trust I had cultivated with retirement communities, elder care attorneys, estate planners, and families who spread our name by word of mouth. Those relationships were mine. I had built them conversation by conversation, hug by hug, promise kept by promise kept. They were not written on paper, but they were real, and they were strong. And no investor, no retreat, no hostile partner could take them from me. Every night I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook, making lists of the people who trusted me most, the allies who could not be swayed by quick money or corporate jargon. Vanessa thought she was cornering me, but she had overlooked the foundation I had laid beneath everything we did. She believed she had 6 weeks until her victory, 6 weeks until I was erased. What she did not realize was that the moment I heard her laughter on that spring morning, the countdown had started for her instead. She had planted seeds of suspicion in me, and those seeds had taken root. Now they were growing into something stronger, sharper, and far more dangerous than she could ever imagine. The more I observed Vanessa, the more I understood that I could not fight this battle alone. Her web was tightening, and with every passing day, she grew bolder in her moves. I needed clarity, someone who could see beyond my emotions, someone who would not be blinded by anger or heartbreak. That was when I thought of Jonathan Marsh, a 70-year-old retired elder law attorney I had once helped when his mother moved into assisted living. He had always respected my work and offered me advice in the early years when I had nothing but faith and a mountain of debt. If anyone could see through the fog of betrayal, it would be him. I called him one gray Tuesday morning and asked if we could meet. His voice on the phone was steady, almost fatherly, and within hours I found myself sitting in his wood-paneled office, surrounded by shelves of law books that smelled faintly of dust and wisdom. I told him everything, every word I had overheard, every maneuver I had witnessed since that morning in April. As I spoke, his brow furrowed deeper, his eyes narrowing not in surprise, but in recognition. When I finally stopped, my chest tight with the weight of confession, he leaned back in his chair and said slowly, "Clara, what you are describing is not a misunderstanding. It is a hostile takeover. And you need to decide right now whether you want to fight for the company or fight for the mission." His words stung because they forced me to face a truth I had avoided. For weeks, I had been telling myself, that I needed to defend Gentle Path Relocations. The name I had given my business when I first launched it. The name that had become a symbol of trust in our community. But Jonathan's question sliced through my pride. Did I truly want to keep the company if keeping it meant battling in court, poisoning our culture, and destroying the very trust I had built? Or did I want to protect what mattered most? The philosophy of compassion that had always guided me, the relationships that could outlive any office lease or logo. I stared at the framed photo on his desk, a faded picture of his mother smiling in her new apartment, surrounded by the carefully chosen belongings I had helped her bring. That move had been one of my earliest jobs, and I remembered how nervous I had been, how desperate to prove that my little service could make a difference. Jonathan tapped the frame lightly and said, "You gave her dignity when no one else could. That was your real gift. Do not let one ambitious partner make you forget who you are." His words sank into me like rain into parched soil. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt my anger shift into resolve. When I left his office, the air outside felt sharper, cleaner, as if I had stepped into a new reality. I was no longer a victim waiting to be pushed out of my own life's work. I was a strategist preparing to protect the soul of what I had built, even if it meant letting go of the shell. Vanessa thought she was clever, gathering investors and whispering about efficiency, but she had underestimated one thing. I was not afraid to start over if it meant preserving what mattered most. And as I walked to my car, I realized something that almost made me smile. For the first time since overhearing her call, I was not just reacting to Vanessa's betrayal. I was planning her downfall. The retreat was held at a sleek resort by the lake, the kind of place with glass walls and polished floors that seemed to whisper about money and ambition. Vanessa had chosen it deliberately, a stage fit for her performance as the visionary leader of our future. I arrived early that first morning, watching the staff gather with curious energy, some excited for team building, others wary but polite. Vanessa moved through the room like a queen at her coronation, greeting each employee with an embrace that felt rehearsed. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and I could see the triumph in her eyes as she waited to unveil her grand plan. When the opening session began, she stood at the podium and spoke with the passion of someone who had memorized every word. She promised growth, expansion, and opportunity, painting a future where we would become a national leader in senior relocations. She spoke of technology that would streamline consultations, packages that would replace personalization, efficiency models that would allow us to handle 3 times as many clients. Her words were met with polite applause, even enthusiasm from the newer hires who had yet to learn the weight of what our work truly meant. But I noticed the veterans, the ones who had stood beside me for years, exchanging uneasy glances, their silence louder than any applause. I played my part perfectly. I smiled, nodded, asked thoughtful questions as if I were impressed. I even praised certain points in front of the team, making it appear as though I had accepted her vision without resistance. Vanessa's eyes sparkled with smug satisfaction, convinced she had won, that I was finally stepping aside. But beneath my calm exterior, I was studying every reaction in the room, every whispered conversation during the breaks, every flicker of doubt in the eyes of those who still remembered why we started. She thought she was building momentum, but what she was really building was a divide, and I could see clearly which side would hold. While she ran efficiency workshops and breakout sessions, I quietly slipped away to take calls and meetings I had arranged with directors of retirement communities. I spoke to them about a new idea, a senior transition certification program, a standard of care that facilities could trust and promote. Instead of moving boxes, it would focus on preserving dignity, offering emotional support and easing the first month of adjustment when seniors were most vulnerable. To my surprise, the response was immediate and overwhelming. "We have been waiting for something like this," one director told me. "Our staff is trained for medical care, not emotional transitions. We need what you are describing." By the end of the second day, I had 7 facilities ready to pilot the program. That night, while the others laughed on a sunset cruise organized by Vanessa, I sat alone on the deck, watching her at a distance. She was in the corner of the boat, speaking on her phone, her gestures sharp and animated. I knew she was confirming details with her investors, preparing for her final announcement that would cement her takeover. I pretended not to notice when she looked at me and quickly ended her call. She thought she was hiding secrets from me, but the truth was, I already knew the end of her story. I could almost hear Jonathan's voice in my mind, reminding me that the company was just a vessel, not the vision itself. And as I watched the stars rise over the lake, I realized I was no longer afraid of losing what she thought she was stealing. Because while Vanessa was busy building her empire of numbers, I was already building something greater. An empire of trust she could never touch. The second night of the retreat ended with the kind of forced cheer that always comes with corporate events. People lingered in small groups, sipping drinks, laughing politely, pretending to feel bonded by trust falls and icebreakers. I felt none of it. My heart was too heavy, my mind too sharp. As the team drifted back toward the conference center, Vanessa touched my arm lightly, her fingers cold even through the fabric of my sleeve. "Clara," she said softly, "I need to speak with you privately." Her tone carried the weight of something rehearsed. I nodded, my face calm, though I already knew this was the moment she had been waiting for. We walked together down to the dock, away from the glow of the hotel lights, where the lake reflected the moon like polished glass. It should have been peaceful, but my pulse was pounding. Vanessa leaned against the wooden railing, the picture of confidence. She looked at me with a smile that was both kind and cruel. "Tomorrow's presentation is going to be a big one," she began, her voice carefully measured. "I want to make sure you are prepared." I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. "Prepared for what?" I asked, my voice steady though every nerve in me was on fire. She hesitated for a moment, as if savoring the reveal. Then she spoke with deliberate precision. "The consultant I have invited represents a group of investors. They see enormous potential in our business model. They are prepared to inject serious capital to expand us nationally. That means we will need to restructure leadership. You would remain the public face of the company, of course. Clients adore you. But the day-to-day operations will shift to people who understand scale. This way, you can focus on what you do best." Translation: she wanted to demote me into a powerless figurehead, while she and her investors stripped my company for parts. I forced my lips into a smile, hiding the storm that raged inside. "That sounds interesting," I said slowly, "but we have never discussed bringing in outside investors before." Vanessa's eyes flickered with impatience before her mask slipped back into place. "The market is moving quickly, Clara. If we do not scale now, competitors will. These investors believe in us, but they also believe in efficiency. And they are committed, with or without you." Her words hung in the cool night air, sharp and final, a threat delivered in velvet wrapping. For the first time, she showed me her true face. Cold, ruthless, certain of her victory. I nodded again, pretending to consider it, while inside I felt an odd sense of calm. Because as she spoke, My phone in my pocket was recording every word. I had not planned it, not exactly, but something in me had known to press the button before we walked outside. Now, her voice, her arrogance, her threats, all of it was mine to keep. She thought she had broken me in this moment, thought she was cementing her control, but in truth, she had just handed me the sharpest weapon I could ask for. She mistook my silence for surrender, when in reality it was strategy. When we returned to the conference center, she looked satisfied, as though she had just secured the final piece of her empire. But I walked beside her with the faintest smile on my lips. She believed she had stripped me of power, but she had no idea that she had given me proof. Proof of her deception, proof of her contempt for me, proof that would one day bring her entire scheme crashing down. And as I slipped into my hotel room that night, I whispered to myself words that filled me with resolve. Let her think she has won. Tomorrow, her mask will begin to crack. The final morning of the retreat arrived bright and clear, the kind of morning that seems to mock anyone who is carrying a storm inside. I dressed carefully, every detail deliberate, because I knew this day would change everything. When I walked into the conference hall, Vanessa was already there with her mystery guest. A tall, silver-haired man in an immaculate suit. His name was Gregory Hale, a consultant representing the investors she had boasted about. He shook my hand firmly and said, "It is a pleasure, Ms. Jennings. I have heard remarkable things about your company." I gave him a polite smile, but inside I thought, you have heard only what she wanted you to hear. The morning began with reports from the workshops. Employees shared notes about efficiency models, standardized packages, and technology platforms Vanessa had been pushing. Gregory clicked through slides about growth velocity, market positioning, and the billions of dollars tied to the aging population. The newer staff looked dazzled, their eyes wide at the promises of rapid expansion. But the veterans, those who had been with me since the early days, watched with skepticism. They knew these shiny numbers were built on stripping away the very soul of what we did. As the hours dragged on, I kept my expression calm, nodding, taking notes, acting every bit the supportive partner. If Vanessa suspected my performance, she did not show it. Finally, Vanessa rose from her chair and walked to the podium. Her smile radiated triumph. "Over the past 3 days," she declared, "we have laid the groundwork for the future of GentlPath relocations. Today, I am thrilled to announce an extraordinary partnership with investors who believe in our vision." She gestured toward Gregory as if unveiling a prized treasure. "With their capital, we can open in 15 new markets within 18 months, create new management roles, and triple our client load. This is the next chapter in our story." Applause broke out, hesitant from some, enthusiastic from others. I felt every pair of eyes turn toward me, waiting for my reaction. Vanessa's gaze lingered, daring me to resist. I stood slowly, my hands steady, my voice calm. "Thank you, Vanessa, for bringing this opportunity to the table. And thank you, Gregory, for sharing your expertise. But before we continue, I have an announcement of my own." The room fell silent, confusion spreading like a wave. Vanessa's smile faltered for the first time. I looked at my team, one by one, and said, "For the past several weeks, I have been working with a consortium of retirement communities who want to adopt our transition methodology within their facilities. After long consideration, I have accepted their offer to lead this initiative. Effective this morning, I have resigned as CEO of GentlPath Relocations." The silence was absolute, broken only by the sharp intake of breath from one of the staff. Vanessa's face froze, caught between shock and fury, while Gregory's eyes narrowed with alarm. I continued. This new venture will allow me to bring our compassionate approach directly to communities across the state, ensuring that dignity and care remain at the heart of every move. Several of our experienced team members will be joining me in this work. I watched as Lynette Ford, our operations coordinator, stood from her chair without hesitation, followed by Zora Lane, our receptionist. Then, one by one, 6 more employees rose to their feet. Loyalty revealed itself in silence more powerful than applause. Vanessa's hands gripped the podium, her knuckles white. Gregory shifted uncomfortably, clearly blindsided. "You cannot just walk away like this," Vanessa hissed, her voice breaking through the stunned quiet. I met her gaze and spoke evenly. "I am not walking away. I am moving forward. The question is, Vanessa, are you ready to compete on the strength of your vision alone?" The room erupted, whispers and gasps rippling through the staff. And for the first time since that spring morning when I overheard her call, it was not me who felt like a ghost. It was Vanessa. The retreat ended in chaos, but I walked away with a clarity I had not felt in months. Vanessa tried to recover, spinning words about opportunity and growth, but the truth was written across every face in the room. Half of my team had already chosen me, and the other half looked uncertain, torn between loyalty and fear of change. Gregory pulled her aside, his jaw tight, his whispers urgent. I could almost hear the panic in his voice even from across the room. They had not expected me to resign on my terms. They had not expected me to stand in front of everyone and claim a future that was not theirs to steal. Within a week, their desperation became obvious. Gregory and his investors sent word through attorneys that they were prepared to buy out my majority shares. It was the only way they could salvage their deal. Vanessa called me late at night, her voice sharp with frustration, demanding that I accept a reasonable price. I listened quietly, then set my own terms. $2.1 million, I said firmly, 3 times our annual revenue. Non-negotiable. She gasped, furious. "That is outrageous," she spat. But I did not flinch. After 8 years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of carrying the weight of every client's grief and hope, I knew exactly what my work was worth. For days there was silence, a silence that felt like the eye of a storm. Then suddenly, they accepted. My attorney called with disbelief in his voice. "They want to close immediately," he said. "Wire transfer today. Signatures by sundown." I leaned back in my chair, letting the reality sink in. They thought they were winning, thought they were finally buying me out of the company they had tried to steal. What they did not know was that while they were scrambling to secure the shell, I had already secured the soul. My new consortium had signed exclusivity agreements. The building lease had quietly transferred to their ownership, and the loyalty of our community partners had already shifted to me. The evening I signed the papers, I drove back to our old office, the Victorian house where my dream had lived for so many years. The halls were quiet, filled with memories of late nights, tearful consultations, and small celebrations. I gathered my belongings. My mother's watercolor paintings, a box of thank you cards from families, the carved wooden sign that read, "Honoring your past, embracing your future." I left a letter on Vanessa's desk, simple and professional, outlining my resignation, my new role, and a reminder that the name was never the heart of what we had built. The heart had already walked out the door with me. The next morning Vanessa called, her voice shaking with fury. The keys do not work. We cannot get into the office. I let her words hang for a moment before answering calmly. You should contact the new building owner. Silence. Then a ragged breath. What have you done? She demanded. I almost smiled as I replied, I did what you taught me, Vanessa. I identified an opportunity and leveraged my assets. You bought a company. I kept its soul. I hung up before she could answer, feeling the weight of 8 years lift from my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I was free. 6 months after I signed away my shares, I stood at a podium in a hotel ballroom filled with retirement community directors, elder care specialists, and families who cared deeply about the aging population. The lights were bright, and the applause felt like a wave as I accepted the Excellence in Transition Care Award for my new company, Pathways with Grace. The consortium had flourished beyond anything I imagined, our certification program reducing relocation stress by more than 60% in the pilot communities. For the first time in years, I felt I was no longer fighting to survive. I was building something that would outlast me. As I looked into the crowd, I thought of every senior who had trusted me with their memories, and I knew I had chosen the right path. Later that evening, during the reception, I caught sight of a face I never expected to see. Vanessa. She stood at the edge of the room, her once polished confidence gone, her eyes darting nervously as she lingered with representatives from moving companies desperate for contracts. Word had spread that Gentle Path relocations had collapsed under the weight of broken promises and rushed transitions. The investors had cut their losses, selling the remains to a national chain for pennies on the dollar. When our eyes met, she looked away first. Her shoulders slumped as if the mask she had worn for so long had finally shattered. In that moment, I felt no anger, only a quiet satisfaction. She had wanted power, but what she had built was hollow. As I made my way through the reception, people approached me with questions about expanding the certification program, about training their staff to handle emotional care as well as physical logistics. Each conversation reminded me of the truth Jonathan had planted in me months before. The company was never the vision. The vision was compassion, dignity, and trust, and that could never be stolen. Investors could buy a brand, but they could not buy loyalty. They could steal a name, but they could not steal purpose. My heart swelled with gratitude that I had chosen not to cling to the shell, but to protect the soul of what I had built. Back in my hotel room, I opened my laptop to find dozens of messages waiting for me. Some were from industry leaders, others from grateful families. One message stood out. It was from Emily Caldwell, the granddaughter of the widow whose move had coincided with the morning I discovered Vanessa's betrayal. She wrote, "Clara, Grandma has settled beautifully into her new home. Every day she plays the piano you saved, and every note reminds us of the life she shared with my grandfather. You gave her more than a move. You gave her a home again. Thank you." Tears blurred my vision as I read her words. This was why I had fought. Not for contracts, not for money, but for stories like hers. As I closed my laptop, I thought about the journey behind me. What began as betrayal had become rebirth. What felt like the end of everything had become the beginning of something far greater. Some might call it revenge, but I did not see it that way. To me, it was preservation, a defense of values worth protecting at any cost. Vanessa had tried to make me a ghost in my own company, but in the end, it was she who faded into the background while I rose into the light. And if you have ever been betrayed, remember this. Sometimes the greatest victory is not destroying your enemy, but proving they could never destroy you. If this story taught me anything, it is this: you do not need to burn a bridge to win. You only need to build a better road and let truth choose the traffic. Power is not the title you keep. It is the standard you refuse to lower. When someone writes you out of the version of the future that serves them, write a truer future that serves your purpose. If you have ever faced a silent betrayal or a smiling dismissal, share your lesson below, ask your question, and help someone who needs courage tonight. If this made you think, comment, like, and share. Because your voice may be the turning point in someone else's comeback.